ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls.
You're listening to House of Cards.
Today, the game is different.
I want to gamble. Gambling is a very serious business. Is that clear?
Welcome to House of Cards. Dave Weishuttle with you here, deep from the swamps of Jersey. We got a great show coming up for you. 2022 was an incredible year for the gaming industry. Not only did we see gambling expansion happen in the United States, but also in Canada as well. A couple of states jumped on the sports betting bandwagon, and a couple of sports books actually closed down this year. We're going to talk all about the incredible things that happened in the gaming industry in 2022 and what we can expect in 2023 with one of our favorite guests. You know Adam Small from Better Collective and USBets.com, and you've heard him here on this show several times. When we come back, I'm going to be talking with Adam about some of the gaming industry's biggest stories of 2022 and what we can expect in the coming year. So stick around. We'll be right back with House of Cards.
Game starts at 20, bet slip is empty. I gotta call KG.
KG, what up?
I got nothing for you, Fox.
Ah, come on. What you got, huh?
And it's spa day, Jamie. You don't interrupt spa day.
Ah, okay. Gracie, what's up? I need some tips.
Jamie, you want a tip?
Yeah. No. Come on, somebody. Jalen, what's up, man? You want a tip? Yeah.
You really want a tip?
I really need some tips.
Don't call somebody on live TV, Jamie Foxx.
Well, you answered. Have other friends anyway.
Marshawn, Barry, holla.
Jamie Foxx. Hey, what's up with it, Fox?
Listen, I need some tips.
I like L.A.
L.A.?
No, Dallas. Dallas not the
Dallas?
best. We gotta get to Miami.
How about Detroit?
Nah, Barry over there.
You know what? I'm gonna call y'all right now. Vanessa, I need your help.
I got a tip for you. Always go with your gut.
I like that. Going with my gut. Let's go with our gut.
You're listening to House of Cards.
Haven't you heard?
I'm talking sick piles
You
of
don't
money.
need to
I'm
hide
talking lay
anymore.
on your bed in your
Now,
Vegas
you can
room,
shop
throw the money in
privately
the
for
air,
that product
and
at
dance as it
AdamandEve.com.
showers down
They've
on your
got
money.
massage
I'm
oil,
talking
lingerie,
frosted
and
glass limo
lots more
money.
we can't
I'm
mention
talking
here.
big
Use offer
cowboy
code
hat,
SPICE404.
silver
They'll
turquoise
give you
buckle
50%
money.
off
I'm
almost
talking
anywhere.
gambling.
3 free DVDs.
I am in love with you.
That's 50% off, free shipping, and more. Private shopping starts at AdamandEve.com.
Welcome back to House of Cards. Dave Weishuttle with you. It's been a very interesting year in the gaming industry. Some states jumped into the sports betting industry while some sports books folded up. And 2023 looks to be just as exciting. To look back on some of the big stories of the year, as well as taking a look ahead to what we can expect in the next year, we are talking to one of our favorite guests. He is from Better Collective and USBets.com. Adam Small is on the line. Adam, as always, welcome back to the show.
It's so great to be back. I miss talking to you guys more regularly. It's fun getting on here every time.
I know it's been a couple of months since you've been here, but boy, it seems like this year lots and lots of things have happened. I mean, and we're going to recap some of them, and we might as well start with one of the biggest stories this past year, and that is the New York launching their mobile sports betting industry. I mean, on January 8th, they went live, and I guess from day one, they became the number one sports betting market in the country. You covered the entire country on the sports betting scene and the gambling scene. In your opinion, how much did New York change the gambling landscape in this country?
I think it remains to be seen. And there are certain ways that I think it could change things, but hasn't yet. Mm-hmm. Particularly their tax structure that they set up around things. Governor at the time, Andrew Cuomo, played a pretty extreme game of hardball with the industry in terms of getting the highest tax rates that we've seen anywhere in the country, and obviously in the most sought after and lucrative market.
Sure.
And we definitely haven't seen yet or determined if that's going to be a sign of things to come or if it's just a one-off thing. It could be years before we have sports betting in California or Texas, and Florida is kind of a whole other story. But as of yet, it looks like in these very biggest markets, it's going to be both uniquely challenging to get sports betting legalized and also challenging for the industry to get terms that are at all favorable, as these state governments are looking to extract as much from the industry as possible. And I mean, we saw this to an extent in Pennsylvania. They went what seemed pretty extreme at the time there. That was the biggest state at the time to legalize, but this is another level. So I think that's a big way that it could change things, just kind of like re-anchoring expectations around what the biggest and most lucrative markets are going to want to get out of the industry in exchange for legalizing. And yeah, we'll see how that plays out over the coming years. But as far as like changing the actual market itself, I don't think it's changed things that much, and maybe that's from my limited perspective living down here in the South. For those who don't know, I'm based in Atlanta, and we don't have legal sports betting in Georgia and won't for at least a couple more years. But I think that it's another state. It's the biggest state that we've had so far, and it's a huge and very visible market. But it's mostly the same books that are in business there as everywhere else. With a couple of exceptions, and I think it's going well, but not like notable in any particular way. And just one of the biggest things that sat with me was just that, a year and a half ago or so, I was out there saying, all the biggest 4 states were just never going to happen, or we're going to take years and years. And obviously I was wrong. New York came together rather quickly after that, and we went from legalization to market launch very, very quickly there.
I'm glad you mentioned the tax rate. I mean, before New York launched mobile sports betting, I mean, I remember I had politicians on here. I remember I had journalists on here saying, that tax rate is going to really dissuade a lot of books from doing business in New York. And then I remember people from my home state of New Jersey thought, oh my God, New York's launch is really going to decimate New Jersey's sports betting industry. And none of that really happened. I mean, the books came to New York and they're making money, and New Jersey chugged along, and, the books are making money in New Jersey, so it didn't destroy New Jersey's market. For me, that really speaks to the strength of the sports betting market in this country. Look, a tax rate and competition isn't going to keep people from betting and isn't going to keep books from making money. Is that how you saw what happened in New York?
Yeah, I mean, I think it very much remains to be seen if any of the operators can actually be profitable there. But I'm not sure that that's a concern for most normal people who don't work in the industry. They're clearly not going to stop operating there. And if they've got to take losses in order to be in the New York market, then they'll probably just eat that. But clearly it hasn't stopped them from marketing. There are at times some of the books are marketing with a bit lower offers than they have in other states. Yeah. I mean, Caesars had that huge $5,000 risk-free bet that very quickly went away early into that market. But now, I mean, we've seen at times some of the books offering smaller promotions in New York than other states. So that is a way that it affects things. And as far as New Jersey is concerned, I think people shouldn't be so surprised that market continues to be so strong. It's a very well-established online gambling market, with online poker and online casino having been live since around this time in 2013. So a bit over 9 years now. Mm-hmm. And so many of these companies have built up significant databases, via online poker and casino, and then sports betting launched there 4.5 years ago now. And so that's been going for a long time. It's a big state still. I think the 11th biggest population in the country. There's a significant number of people who come in and out of the state from other major states and markets, Philadelphia, New York in particular, and probably do some betting while there. And they have a lot more operators live than either Pennsylvania or New York. So there are a lot of reasons that New Jersey would continue going strong, and I'm not surprised to see it. I think it's a very well-run and well-regulated market, and the long-term results that they've been having, the way that they've continued to grow and prosper over the years, should be notable to other states that are considering legislating. I think that if you look at a state like Pennsylvania that has a much higher tax rate and a bit more data than New York to go on, you'll see that overall, I believe they've made quite a bit more tax revenue. And if that's the main goal, then maybe that's the model for success for a state. But if you also want to have a prosperous industry and, job growth and things like that, then maybe you want to do it the way New Jersey is.
Mm-hmm. Stick around. We'll be right back with more House of Cards.
Drizzly makes it easy to shop a huge selection of beer, wine, and liquor from wherever I am. I just open the app, find what I want, and it's at my door in under 60 minutes.
Drizzly. Ding dong, Drizzly.
You're listening to House of Cards.
Your Majesty, the royal wrestlers await.
I'll bet on the little guy. How much? 3,000 guineas, 2 geese, and a duck. That's a foul bet.
Welcome back to House of Cards. Dave Weishaupt with you. House of Cards is brought to you by BetMGM Casino. Play your favorite casino games at BetMGM Online Casino. Slots, table games, live dealer games, everything you love about Atlantic City and Vegas, all online at BetMGM. Go to BetMGM Casino, create an account using our promo code Turnpike, and become a verified player. New players get $25 free when signing up, plus a first deposit bonus up to $1,000. That's promo code Turnpike at BetMGM.com for a 100% deposit match up to $1,000 plus $25 free. Must be 21 years or older to place a bet. Terms and conditions apply. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. For those of you just joining us, I am talking with Adam Small from USBets.com and Better Collective. Two more states that made news in the sports betting industry was Kansas and Maryland. And you mentioned New York moving fast in the sports betting industry. Tip of the cap to Kansas, because from the point they made sports betting legal to the date that the first bet was placed, 81 days passed, which is the fastest any state has ever implemented their sports betting industry. Is there something to be learned from Kansas? If I know there's a whole bunch of other states grappling with the issue of sports betting in the coming year. Massachusetts comes to mind right now, who seems to have endless meetings and meetings. They're meeting about when to meet next. It's incredible what they're doing up there. But can people learn something from Kansas? And are you surprised how fast Kansas implemented their sports betting industry?
I guess I'm not super surprised. There have been, various states that have passed legislation and gotten to market pretty quickly, and other states that have taken a while. And there are different reasons for that. It's not always as simple as if another state would just pass a law like this state did, or set up a regulatory agency like this state did, that it would be easier for them. It just might have been a little bit simpler in Kansas to get going than in certain other places. I think everything always comes down to what are the existing incumbents on the ground? What's their status? What's the existing status of the regulatory agency? Do you have a situation like Tennessee where you don't even have casinos, where you're basically giving it to the lottery, but the lottery doesn't have any experience with or means of regulating this activity, and they kind of have to start from scratch? Or are you in a state like Florida where you're going to be in court for years over tribal compacts and things like that, or California where there are all these stakeholders that have divergent interests and are constantly derailing each other? I think there are so many factors at play. Do you have a state where you have to do ballot initiatives? Do you have to amend your constitution? Kansas, I just think the stars aligned. It's a pretty small state. It was pretty simple to get live, and kudos to them for pulling it off. Because you have everything the way that you need it for a fast launch doesn't mean that's going to happen either.
Yeah.
It seems to me like it's gone very smoothly there. The market has been successful beyond what I ever thought a state like Kansas would do right away. It certainly crushed what, for example, like West Virginia did in its early days, or just thinking about other smaller kind of states that have gone live earlier on in all this. Kansas looks pretty strong. I mean, it's not a state with a huge population or a bunch of big cities or anything like that, but they look like a pretty good example of what states in that kind of like 30th to 50th range of population can expect if they do things right. So, I mean, we're not expecting, Hawaii anytime soon or Utah, but there are a whole bunch of other states in there that maybe haven't done this yet because because it's a lot of work to get all this set up. And maybe when you're a small state like North Dakota or whatever, you're hesitant to put a lot of effort into this, but maybe Kansas gives some hope to states like that you can get going pretty quickly and do a better job. I mean, contrast it with their neighbor Wyoming. I'm pretty sure they neighbor each other. I mean, Wyoming just took forever to get anybody live, and obviously they're the smallest state population wise. There's not a lot of people there, but it just seems to me like Kansas is your textbook smooth launch for a pretty small state.
When we're talking about speed, I want to ask you about another state that seems to fall on the other side of the spectrum, and that's Maryland. I know a lot of people were not pleased by how long it took Maryland to launch mobile sports betting. I think at one point the governor of Maryland sent the Gaming Commission a letter to hurry them up. Look, I don't live in Maryland, so I didn't really feel anxious about how quickly they were moving, but were they moving slow? It just seemed like they were kind of crossing their T's and dotting their I's. But did it take unusually long for Maryland to launch sports betting, mobile sports betting?
I wouldn't say unusually long. It took a while. It was definitely slower than I'm sure the operators hoped and the regulators in the state hoped. I think everyone wanted to be live sooner than they ended up. But I don't think it was unusually long. I think there have been other states. I think Pennsylvania took unusually long to get anything going. If I'm just like taking that broader view of like in comparison to every other state, I don't think they did that badly with that. Yeah. They're not Kansas, that's for sure. No. But the important thing is you got to be thinking long term, right? And you got to get things right. And I think like what I wouldn't want to see in a state like Maryland or anywhere else is for big mistakes to get made that are ultimately costly to the industry and its stakeholders and especially to the local population that is affected by all this. And so if you look at, for example, Tennessee as an example of a state that I think just clearly made a mistake by licensing the brand Action 247, I don't see how that was a good decision. I don't see how that benefits the local consumer, or how it's good for the industry as a whole, or how it's good for the state of Tennessee. And so, they just clearly made a terrible mistake by licensing these guys, and, are going to pay the price for it sooner or later. And I think that, it's much more important to get decisions like that right, rather than to launch on a specific timeline. So, I guess I'm taking sort of a not so subtle shot at Tennessee for what they did there. But, point to me is Maryland is going live with good, reliable operators, and we'll have a robust market for years to come. And that's more important than, a few months delay.
Well, looking at the numbers, it seems like it was really worth the wait for Maryland. I mean, they opened over the Thanksgiving holiday, and GeoComply said there were like over 16 million transactions over the weekend and 3 million transactions on Thanksgiving Day. And I know before the launch, we had one of your great writers, Bennett Conlon, who gave a great analysis of that market and the whole region. what can we take from that opening weekend? Was it a shiny new toy for people in Maryland, or do you think that's a strong market that'll continue? Is that even a top 10 market, do you think?
It's going to be around a top 10 market. I'm not sure that, long term, I don't think it will be, but it's somewhere right around the 10th biggest state that has sports betting, I think, or that has, full online sports betting. Maybe just slightly below 10th biggest. And I think it'll be a decent sized market. It's a decent sized state. I think top 20 overall in population. And, it's interesting because it's launching in a region that already has sports betting in most of the surrounding states. Maryland is close to Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Delaware, Washington, D.C., which even has online sports betting, as well as Virginia and West Virginia. And all of those places have legal sports betting already. And so, I think it's quite likely that a lot of people in Maryland regularly pass through other nearby states that have sports betting and already have accounts on some of the sites. And I'm not sure it changed their lives that much. I think that it's better. The more states we have, the better. The easier it is for people to access these products without having to go jump through hoops or go to another state or whatever, the better. But I think it's just, it's another step in the progress of getting towards having most of this country being fairly uniform in terms of what's available in these services in this industry.
Stick around. We'll be right back with more House of Cards. Hey, this is Dave Weishuttle from House of Cards with your House of Cards gaming report for the week of December 19th, 2022. The proposed Caesars Casino in Times Square added a new partner to the plan. Rock Nation, the entertainment company owned by Jay-Z, joined Caesars Entertainment and S.L. Green in the plans to bring a casino to 1515 Broadway in Manhattan. The proposal plans to use the 8 bottom floors of the 54-story building already there to be the casino, with the rest of the floors as a hotel. PokerStars inked a deal with the National Hockey League's Detroit Red Wings. Under the multi-year agreement, not only will PokerStars be the official sponsor of the Red Wings, but players on the online poker site will be able to win Red Wings merchandise, game tickets, and memorabilia. In 2021, Michigan became the 5th state to legalize and regulate online poker in the United States. And finally, Hard Rock International broke ground on what will be their permanent casino site in Bristol, Virginia. Once completed, the 300,000 square foot property will have 1,300 slot machines, 50 table games, a sports book, and several food and drink options, including a Hard Rock Cafe. The property is expected to open in the spring of 2024. Can't wait to visit. Have any news or tips regarding casinos, gaming, or legislation? Send us an email at newsroom@houseofcardsradio.com and follow us on Twitter at HOC Radio.
You're listening to House of Cards. Check out our website at houseofcardsradio.com.
Welcome back to House of Cards. Dave Weishuttle with you. This portion of House of Cards is brought to you by SCCG Management, delivering technology-driven capability, expertise, and customer and business value to the gaming industry for over 30 years. For more information, go to sccgmanagement.com. For those of you just joining us, I am talking with Adam Small from usbets.com and Better Collective. You know, when we talk about gambling expansion in 2022, one of the biggest stories is what happened in Ontario, Canada. I mean, not only did they legalize sports betting, but they also online poker and online casinos. It was such a huge story. I mean, we've had Paul Burns on, CEO of the Canadian Gaming Association, several times on the show, and he's doing an incredible job up there. I'm curious, what do you think that the gambling expansion in Canada means for the gaming industry in the U.S.? Can we make a connection? Will this spur more online casinos and online poker in this country because Ontario did it?
I don't think so. I think it's fairly unlikely that what happens in Canada will affect proliferation here in the U.S. I think it's a good thing overall. Canada definitely had an interesting way of going about things that was quite different than the U.S., where they have tried to, bridge offshore providers into their markets rather than simply banning them. And it's certainly been a much less protectionist way of regulating there compared to the U.S. that very clearly had the interests of certain operators in mind and didn't really care what happened to the existing stakeholders who they viewed as lawbreakers. Yeah, basically, Canada was just a very different situation. It was long considered by many to be a gray market, and they took a much lighter approach to handling the people that have operated in that market historically. And I think it's going pretty well so far. It's very different than the U.S. Yeah. And you see some of the U.S. operators are there, Bet Rivers and so on, but also there are other operators that aren't in the U.S. that are among the biggest. I mean, Sports Interaction is probably the most well-known Canadian sports betting brand, or right up there. And I mean, I've known them forever. I think I made bets on them back when I was in college, and I'm in my 40s, so that wasn't that recent. And so they were in the U.S. as an offshore provider at some point, but they're now one of the biggest in Canada, if not the biggest. Bet99 is another one that I wasn't particularly familiar with until I started working in the Canadian market. And there are others as well. So it's a different place. They've got online casino. They've got other products that aren't everywhere in the U.S. and they've got their own issues with things being different from region to region. But I think it's going pretty well. I think it's not particularly important as it pertains to the U.S. market, but I think it's great for North America and for the world and for this industry to have more countries regulating rather than leaving things to the whims of gray market or black market operators.
I'm glad you mentioned the gray market. I know that was such an issue in Canada. I know, and a report was just released in Canada that 46 of these gray market operators actually became regulated in Ontario, which is great news for the gaming industry. But I'm curious for the U.S. market. Do you think the gray market and unregulated sites continue to be a huge issue for the regulated gaming industry? Do you see this situation changing over next year or over the coming years with regard to offshore and unregulated sites?
Well, I think it's been gradually changing, right? So it's complicated. The offshores have existed for a long time. There are different ones today than there were years ago, and there are some of the same ones. But the situation is always evolving. I think that the U.S. operators kind of feel like they've won for the most part, and like these offshores are not a big threat to them. And maybe if anything, they're focused on trying to keep the offshores from becoming regulated U.S. operators or selling their assets to U.S. operators or whatever. And so I think like that could be the next kind of frontier in all this is, there are pretty heavy rumors that BetCris, for example, is going to be launching some sort of U.S. product or involved in a U.S. product. And they've been one of kind of the main symbols as a company of offshore operation based in Costa Rica for, decades now. They were my neighbors when I lived down there. I'm very familiar with them. It's a very professional organization, but, no doubt, they've been viewed at least at times as an illegal offshore operator, and now they're trying to get into the U.S. market, and I think you've heard rumors about Five Dimes as well.
Sure.
doing the same. I think that one's less likely, if I have to guess. But I haven't heard anything about Bovada. I kind of doubt after all the bravado about that over the years, and Calvin Ayre, showing himself on the Sultan of Brunei's private island or whatever, that this is probably not going to happen. But I think that may be the next frontier, is the offshores throwing up the white flag, because there's no way that their market is only getting smaller, the market that they're serving, and trying instead to become licensed regulated providers and seeing where that goes. And to sort of segue into something I'm interested in talking about, Dave, I think it is very interesting to think ahead to what the general kind of like next wave is going to look like in terms of operators here in the U.S.
Sure.
Because the story to date has really been about FanDuel and DraftKings primarily. And, outside of them, BetMGM to an extent, Caesars to an extent, and I think, people are familiar with Barstool and PointsBet and so on. But the story has really been about FanDuel and DraftKings. Those are the first two anyone's going to talk about and think about, and just kind of how they grew via DFS and then became the top sports betting operators in the United States. And I'm not sure that that's really the long-term story. That's just the story that we've had so far.
Yeah.
I think the long-term story runs through other brands that haven't yet become prominent in the U.S. for sports betting, whether that is, Bet365, which, is a dominant global provider, but it is only in pretty limited space in the U.S. so far, but clearly has plans and isn't just abandoning this market, where I think most of the European operators that are in the U.S. are probably doomed to fail. I don't see, where Unibet is going, for example, or Betfred or some of these other smaller ones. But Bet365, I think people generally tend to believe in. I think everybody wonders what's going to happen with Fanatics. What's this going to be like? They've got the former CEO of FanDuel running their sports betting operation. They've got a pretty dynamite team and a huge budget. They just raised money at a $31 billion valuation, which is kind of amazing considering just that everything else in the world is down. But they're continuing to grow their valuation. I think everybody takes them very seriously, and I kind of wonder. I mean, what happens when some of these offshores like BetCris start approaching the U.S.? What's this market going to look like? I don't think it just ends with FanDuel and DraftKings owning everything. So I'm really interested to see where things go there.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because, it wasn't so rosy for all the sports books in 2022. There was actually a couple that ceased operations, Fubo Sportsbook and MaximBet. I mean, I was very surprised that they closed down. What do you attribute that to? Did you see any indications in the market that, they just didn't fit in, or the market couldn't sustain that number of sports books? What are we looking at when we see failures in sports books? Do we see look at the market, or do we see the internal structure of the sports book?
It's a good question. I mean, I think they're both the things you mentioned are factors.
Yeah.
I think global macroeconomic conditions are a major factor here. Where I think there were a number of books that kind of believed that they could just kind of ride it out as kind of also rans in the U.S. and slice out a bit of market that, would be worth something at some point, whether it's, a small but meaningful market share that's profitable years in the future, or, they're looking to sell to somebody else, as the case with, PointsBet or, Bet Rivers. I think, the rumors are always out there, both those companies. Or, if it's a European operator like Kindred, which owns Unibet, that just kind of thinks like we have the expertise that eventually we'll be able to, have a meaningful market share here if we just kind of like stay the course. And I think, there are all these different stories that people tell themselves when it's easy to get money and you're using other people's money to, experiment. But when it gets harder to get money and you've got to make real, actually difficult decisions, then you have to start really asking, is the story I've been telling myself really feasible, or is it just a story that I want to believe? And I think in the case of something like Maxim-Bet, for example, I think like they were always kind of doomed to fail, and I felt like everybody but them knew it. Whereas in the case of something like Fubo, maybe they were always doomed to fail, maybe they weren't, but they do have a core business that is growing, as I understand, or is relevant in streaming TV, and it's probably just a lot harder to go out and say, like, let's invest all of our much more limited now capital in this other area where we're way behind everybody else. So I think it's just different stories everywhere. I think these companies have to ask themselves, how do I differentiate? Like, how do I convince people that you should make your bets here rather than on FanDuel? Yeah. And if there's no real story there, then what are you doing? I mean, at least, I was harping on Action 247 before, and I'll continue to harp on them, but at least they have a real story, which is, people come and get payday loans at our shops and then gamble that money. Yeah. So it's not a good story. It's a terrible story, and hopefully the authorities look into it at some point. Sure. But at least they have a story. Like, this is how we're going to get market share. Yeah. Well, look, market share is something I think about every time I see the New York mobile sports betting numbers. We mentioned DraftKings, FanDuel, Caesars, BetMGM. Every month, they make up 93 to 94 of the market share of the mobile sports betting in New York. And I'm thinking, how do these other 5 mobile sports books survive? And how can they survive, especially with a 51% tax rate? I'm just, do you think we're getting... What's 51% of zero? Yeah, nothing. Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. So, but should we be looking for more closures, or, as the economists say, market correction? I mean, living in New Jersey, I know that Atlantic City works better with 9 casinos than with 12 casinos. Will we see that some markets work better with smaller amounts of sports books than larger amounts of sports books? Yeah, I mean, I think that because of licensing and tax costs in the U.S., you are going to see a smaller number of total operators probably in particularly places where there are significant upfront costs to operate. Like Pennsylvania's, one that comes to mind for me, where there are like very sizable licensing fees just to be involved. I think it's just going to depend on that, because if you have tax rates, I mean, the tax rate can go up to 100, but as long as there's not really like a cost to scale into that market for the operators, if it's just a tax rate and not, a bunch of additional upfront costs, then they don't really have a reason to leave specific markets. I think what's more likely is that you'll see a continued trickle of some of these lower tier operators that, for whatever reason, just like, kind of decide, okay, I've had enough. I call uncle, like, I don't want to keep spending money to be in the U.S. And if I don't spend money, I'm not going to carve out anything, relevant. Mm-hmm. And we've seen it several times now. We've seen it with, I thought Churchill Downs was a really surprising one, actually, because they had a real genuine lane, that the whole horse betting lane with the database that they have, the relevant brands they have, the Kentucky Derby, and so on, that they did have a lane, and even they determined that this was just too much for them. So that one, to me, was probably the most surprising one of these exits so far, whereas, hearing about Maxim-Bet going away just reminded me that Maxim-Bet existed at all. Yeah. Stick around. We'll be right back with more House of Cards.
starts at 20, bet slip is empty, I gotta call KG.
KG, what up?
I got nothing for you, Fox.
Ah, come on. What you got, huh?
And it's spa day, Jamie. You don't interrupt spa day.
Ah, okay. Gracie, what's up? I need some tips.
Jamie, you want a tip?
Yeah. No. Come on, somebody. Jalen, what's up, man? You want a tip? Yeah.
You really want a tip?
I really need some tips.
Don't call somebody on live TV, Jamie Fox.
Well, you answered. Have other friends anyway.
Marshawn, Barry, holla.
Jamie Fox. Hey, what's up with it, Fox?
Listen, I need some tips.
I like L.A.
L.A.?
No, Dallas. No,
Dallas?
Dallas not the
Dallas?
best. We gotta get to Miami. How about Detroit? Nah, Barry over there.
You know what? I'm gonna call y'all right now. Vanessa, I need your help.
I got a tip for you. Always go with your gut.
I like that. Going with my gut. Let's go with our gut.
You're listening to
Dave Weishottle with you. For those of you just joining us, I am talking with Adam Small from USBets.com and Better Collective. Well, as one year ends, another one begins, and I'm very curious to get your impressions of what we can expect in the gaming industry in 2023. And I guess we're not going to have to wait very long for an exciting event in the gaming industry because Ohio launches on January 1st. What do you think we can expect from Ohio's launch, and what kind of market do you think Ohio will be given the amount of pro and collegiate teams in the state?
I think it's going to be awesome. Yep. It's pretty solid, industry-friendly regulatory regime. A lot of operators coming in, including all the ones that everyone expects.
Yeah.
And it's a great state for sports. I grew up next to Ohio, spent a ton of time there growing up. I used to play tennis tournaments all over the state all the time. I feel like I've been to every random town I keep hearing getting mentioned in Ohio at some point in my life. And so I got a lot of love for that state and appreciation for it. There's a lot of cool things there, and a ton of sports that people care a lot about. I mean, look at Ohio State football. Sure. And just the continuing interest in that over the years. Look at the two major professional football and baseball teams in the state. You've got a professional basketball team. You've got a professional hockey team. You got three major to major-ish cities in the state, with Columbus, Cincinnati, and Cleveland, and some other pretty decent-sized markets as well, like Toledo. And I think it's going to be a great state for the industry. I think it's going to be, maybe not quite what Michigan is, just because Michigan has online casino and they just had such an incredible run since launching a couple years ago. But I think it's going to be right there with them, and I'm really excited about it. We've been working really, really hard on Ohio for the last year, trying to get that market ready to go, and we're really looking forward to that one being live.
I'm fascinated with Ohio just for the applications they're getting for sports betting. I think, Crozier's has an application in. You can you'll probably be able to gamble at Crozier stores. Phantom Fireworks just applied for an application. I know there's reports that a high school actually sent their application in for a sports betting application. How interesting will Ohio get in this coming year? It just seems like it's going to be such. I actually said I think it's going to be a top 5 market. I think it's going to replace Pennsylvania as number 5 in handle. But what do you think? What can we expect from Ohio?
Well, it's going to be huge.
Yeah.
And I think that you're onto something with it getting into that high range, in that they're going to greater lengths than some other states to, maximize the number of places that people will be able to bet. I think that's a big difference between Ohio and other places. They're going to have all these betting kiosks, for example. And so you have, licensing of a certain class happening with, with certain kind of retail establishments. I believe it's like a Type C license. They have 3 different kinds, and so you'll have a bunch of places that you can bet on sports that aren't brand sports books per se, but maybe just like some restaurant or bar that you hang out at, and so it is going to be a place where you can kind of broadly bet around the state. whether it's on your phone or like in places that you hang out. And that does make it different from some of these other states. So, it's going to be really interesting. I hope they're really, really careful with the problem gambling stuff because, when you do allow physical betting locations to proliferate, whether it's something like VGT's video game terminals that they have in some of these states, like Illinois in particular, or otherwise, just having places where you can buy lots of lottery tickets or whatever.
Yeah.
You do have to really step up, how careful you are about it. I don't think it's quite the same as mobile, where it's really easy to track everything electronically. When people are making bets and stuff like that, when it's in person, you really need to monitor that stuff and have a good eye on it. But I'm really hopeful that Ohio is going to handle all that well and have a really successful launch. Now, although I will say that launching at 12:01 a.m. on New Year's Day is like the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life, and I can't believe that they're actually doing that.
I thought that it was going to be insane. I guess you drop the ball and just start betting right away. But
and by the way, the Ohio State playoff game is December 31st.
Yeah, I know.
So all that revenue is going to be missed. The market's going to launch like hours after that game ends.
It's unbelievable when I found that out. Someone told me, Ohio State doesn't play on a Sunday, so that's when the first is. So I was shocked. I can't believe they misread the schedule like that. But let me ask you, one of your great writers, Jeff Edelstein, wrote an article on SportsHandle.com wondering if 2023 would be the year for expansion of online casinos in this country. What type of expansion will occur in 2023? Will there be more online casinos? Will there be online poker in more states? What do you think 2023 has in store for us?
I think that it's a question a lot of people are asking about the online casino thing. And I think it's a matter of convenience for the industry more than like a matter of what of what is actually happening in legislatures, at least that I'm aware of so far. That being said, when lobbying efforts get focused on getting certain things to happen, often those things do in fact happen. So it'll be interesting to see if this catches in the States. Obviously when companies like DraftKings that have relied entirely on investor capital for years and years to keep growing their database are no longer able to access the same amounts of capital or able to access capital as cheaply as before, just given raising interest rates and, a more difficult investor climate in general. They're going to come out and start focusing on things that can actually drive profits for them rather than simply trying to drive growth. And online casino is great for that. It raises yield significantly on a per customer basis. It is a product that can be made profitable very quickly, and that drives a ton of revenue. And this is evidenced by just looking at the numbers in New Jersey. I can't remember exactly what it is, but the New Jersey online casino market is, I believe, a multiple of the sports betting market in terms of revenue.
Yeah.
And so it is. It's quite a bit of money that's on the line there, and it's money that can be made off of customers they've already acquired, a lot of the time. I think that the industry clearly wants this, obviously, and if they believe that focusing lobbying efforts will actually yield results, then I think they'll be pushing for it. But 2023, that's right around the corner. These efforts do take time, and I'm not expecting 15 states to legalize online casino next year.
Adam, we're running out of time, but can you give out the websites for Better Collective where people could read these great articles about the country's gaming industry?
Yeah, please come follow us on SportsHandle.com and USBets.com. Those are the two main ones that I'm involved with. We do great industry news. Sports Handle covers the sports betting and industry and regulatory regimes and legislation. US Bets covers online casinos and a lot of fun stories around the industry. Both are sites that all your listeners should be following. We're on Twitter at sports_handle and US_bets. And please read our stuff.
Adam Small from Better Collective and USBets.com, thanks so much for coming on and giving us the latest on what's going on in the gaming industry. It's always great talking to you, and I wish you, your family, and everyone at Better Collective happy holidays. And I can't wait to talk to you in the new year. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, have a great new year and a happy holiday. Wish you guys the best.
Well, that'll do it for us this week. I'll see you next time on House of Cards.
Across the desert plain, you build a house of